Excited to dive right into this topic. Hello, Hilmon. How are you?
I'm awesome. How are you, Angelica?
I'm good. I'm sad that it's our final one together
I know
as we
partying
end
is such sweet.
2022.
You've been awesome.
Uh, Oh, it's been such a pleasure. It's been so fun, and I'm sure everyone is excited to hear what your little icebreaker is today.
No,
As
me too.
As you know, every series that we start off with is an icebreaker to wait for folks to trickle in. And we've been getting to know Hillman a little bit more in each and every one of them. We learned about his coffee and tea choice. We learned um, what his lunch choice was. Shout out Chipotle, and also what
Chipotle.
song, and also what song that kind of kept him going that week. But for the final one of the four-part series, I'd love to know, Hillman, if you could pick one superpower in the world, what would it be and why?
Oh God, really? This makes me far more nervous than anything else I do. Almost, you know. Um, I gotta go with the first answer I had, and it's kind of vanilla, it's kind of plain, but the ability to fly would just
Mhm.
be pretty amazing. And it's not just the getting to somewhere. So it's like, it's not that I want to like close my eyes and just be somewhere. Like that's no fun. Like teleporting, no interest
Mhm.
whatsoever. But like flying, like there's just something about flying. I sit on my balcony. So we moved from a house in San Francisco, and now we're in a high rise in Miami. And so I'm up there, like high up, whatever. And I'm out there in the morning and I'm meditating, and like the sun comes up, and it's like you see these birds, and they're just like I forgive my ignorance, bird people, but whatever those birds are that are near the sea, I know someone's typing like seagulls, Hillman. Come on, you can do this. But like they get out there and they're just like riding the like air pockets and the like, it's effortless. They're just soaring. You know what I mean? I think that that's
Yep.
really cool. And I have a cousin who's a pilot. He's a commercial pilot, and he's offered to take me up in a glider, and I just don't trust him. He's kind of dodgy, so I'm not going up there with him. But I think that the ability to fly is darn cool.
Yeah, honestly, that would be or is your favorite superhero by any chance Superman then? Or you just like love the
No,
concept of
not
him
at
flying?
all. Absolutely not. It doesn't really have a favorite superhero anymore. It's like I would tell you who it was when I was a kid, but I think that the of these heroes through all of the Marvel movies and everything else have evolved so much that it may not be
Mhm.
cool. I'm not telling you that one. You'll have to invite me back for one more webinar to find out who the favorite superhero was.
Noted, noted. We will definitely have that for the next icebreaker. We'll hold you to that. I was gonna say teleporting because I love the idea of
Oh, I'm
just being
sorry.
able to. No, I know. When you said, I was like, that was gonna be my answer. But now that you think about it, I would also like the superpower to be able to read people's minds.
Oh God,
Um,
why? I don't want to know what
I
people's
don't
business
know.
are. You kidding me? I spent enough
I
time, like I get into an elevator and someone looks at me
know.
and I'm like, what do I smell? Like, what are they thinking? Am I mean? Am I obnoxious? Was I frowning? That would be like so stressful. No way.
I know, I know. I mean, the ability to just turn it on and off. I don't want that superhero power that just like many noises in your head, like you have to
I've
control it,
already got
like
that.
like the whole superhero arc that you find in the typical comic books, where like the person that gets these superpowers has to be able to control them and use it for
Yeah.
good. But yeah, I don't know. I'm curious for those who are tuning in, what superhero would you, or superpower would you have if you could have one? And also let me know where you're calling in from.
Awesome.
All right, so let's get started. Again, today is our final masterclass with Hilmon Sori, how to make hiring your competitive advantage. This is the last masterclass, part of the four-part series of the Modern Sales Pro and Hilmon Sori Sales School Performance. So if you're new here and want to check out the last three masterclass, go on over to the MSP website under Sales School Performance, where all of Hilmon's masterclass recording, presentation, resources mentioned, and key takeaways are found. I'm actually going to drop it off in the chat. So please bookmark it and always and share it with your friends and networks because it is such a great masterclass. And next, I'm going to talk a little bit about MSP. So hi, everyone. My name is Angelica. I'm one of the community event managers at Modern Sales Pros. For those of you who are not familiar, Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations and enablement, aka our modern sales pros. Our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer questions they struggle to solve on their own and help them to see around corners they may not know about. We do this through live sessions like the one you're at today, online forum, and our quarterly summits, which I'll talk a little bit about in the next slide. And we're also starting to get back into in-person events. Oh, I feel like I hear feedback, Hilmon.
Is that for me? I guess
think
it would
so.
be for me if it's not from anyone else. Okay, let me mute myself while you keep talking.
Thank you. So speaking about our summit, I am super excited to talk about our upcoming summit. So please mark your calendars. We're back with another Modern Sales Pros Revenue Excellence Summit. You can join us for the Mega SKO on January 24th to the 26th. We have about 25 content tracks, 3,000 attendees, and about 65 speakers. We have the founder of Drift, SalesLoft, Lean Data, partner at Stage 2 Capital, and so much more that we'll be announcing soon in the next few weeks. So stay tuned and don't miss out. Sign up today. You can register here and I'll drop the link in the chat. So definitely secure your spot. And some housekeeping notes. As you know, this event is going to be recorded. I'll have it up on the MSP previous event page, as well as the content track for the sales school performance on the MSP page as well. And if you have a question for Hilmon, please use the Q&A function or leverage the chat as well. We'd be sure to get them. And last but not least, this event is sponsored by Closed Loop and Coach CRM. Closed Loop is a revenue strategy firm. They drive performance for management, sales, customer success, and enablement in the fastest growing companies in the world. You can learn more about Closed Loop here. I'll drop it in the chat, so be sure to check them out. And then Coach CRM is the coaching results management platform that leverages technology that drives the rep to manager communication, proven to move the needle on performance, professional development, and revenue. You can learn more about Coach CRM here, and I'm going to drop it in the chat as well, so be sure to check it out. Now, on to our speaker, not the one and only Hilmon Sorry, because we all know that he's the third. I'm going to pass it off to Hilmon to say a few words about himself, and then he's going to dive right into the content.
Hey there, Angelica. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Can you see me?
No, you are off camera.
I don't know why that's happening. Well, we'll see if it comes back. How about that?
Yeah, for sure. Feel free to also hop in and out if you want to do that quickly. And
we'll do it really quickly. Let's see what that does.
Sounds good. Thanks everyone for your patience. As you know, live events have technical difficulties, but that's the beauty of live events. You never really know what to expect. But luckily for this event platform, you can come back in and out, and you can test to see if it works. But that's usually my trick when something doesn't work. I usually just like to unplug it and plug it back in, or put it in rice to see if technology will work. We'll see if Hilmon comes back. And he's back.
Can't keep me out of here. What's up with that?
We can see you and we can hear you.
Fantastic. Thank you for the reprieve. Sorry, folks. Back in action. Happy Monday, or whatever day you happen to be listening to this. Glad you've tuned in for Sales Performance School. It's our final. I'm so sad, Angelica, but it's our final session. The idea, when we collaborated with MSP around doing the Sales Performance School, the idea was, how do we give sales professionals, modern sales pros in particular, really key insights into some things that you can do on your own in your own organization to up level, to see blind spots and kind of avoid things that might be coming. I think this was really timely, given a lot that was going on in the economy, a lot of challenges that we've all been experiencing in the marketplace over the last few months. And so I feel really fortunate to have been invited to do this. I thank all of you who are watching live, the folks who are contributing to the chat with respect to questions. Angelica, I'm sorry I missed it. I was dealing with the technical difficulties. I'm not sure that we said that These are not formal for me. So if you have questions as I go along, put them in the chat. Angelica will let me know. She's got her eye on that. Just to revisit where we've been, we started off talking about coaching and the importance of coaching as it relates to being able to drive individual and team performance from your seat in sales management. Then we went into the concept of sales enablement and it not just being relegated to a role, but how specifically sales enablement through the use of strategy, systems, staff, and skills can actually propel the entire organization to have a consciousness around how we go about engaging with our prospects, engaging with our customers, and driving our sales goals. We talked about sales playbooks relative to how we take all of this stuff, whether it's methodology or process orientation, put it into something that is a live ecosystem where your team can utilize this in workflow, not in training, not in LMS, not as some staid or inactive document that sits somewhere, but stuff that's in workflow that becomes an ecosystem of feedback around customer conversations, around discovery, around all of the things that salespeople need in their daily in order to be impactful. And now we're here at this point where we want to talk about how hiring can be competitive advantage. And I've kind of expanded this a little bit because I tend to do that. So I've expanded it beyond just hiring. So this is not just for hiring professionals. This isn't just for people who are hiring. This is for anybody that's managing human resources inside of the company, meaning salespeople, right? Not HR managers, but people who are managing salespeople. You have a responsibility for hiring, you have responsibility for promoting, you have responsibility for getting people into the organization and engaged in the organization, you have responsibility for them growing, developing mastery, and moving on into their next role. So why is this important? Who cares about this stuff, right? Well, first off, obviously, CEO, COO, founders, we care about these things from the vantage point of being proactive. The key around proactivity is to understand really carefully what's impactful as it relates to a specific resource, a human resource. We're going to talk about people as resources for just a moment here, forgive me. We want to know what an individual asset can bring to an organization, what we can imbue them with to help make them even more impactful in the organization and as human beings along their own personal and professional journey. And we want to be able to do this repeatedly. One of the biggest challenges that I hear from folks who are in the C-suite, whether it's at a startup organization or whether they are further along the growth path of a company, is how do I identify salespeople and ensure they're going to get in and perform, right? You may have heard this before. You might be looking around your organization thinking the same thing. You've interviewed somebody, they seem great. You bring them into the organization, they do well, and they peak and they valley, they peak and they valley. And it's like, where do I find some constancy here, right? CFOs are people who are counting the numbers or counting the beans. These folks are really important from the vantage point of understanding resource allocation as it plugs into your growth model, right? I need this many of this kind of person who I can expect to perform at this level, and that's going to correlate to this kind of revenue or this kind of growth or this kind of whatever it is that they might be tracking, right? Sales leaders, these folks are critical for us, and it's also really important that we're able to identify talent pools, right? Pools of talent where we don't have to spend our budget to the ceiling to be able to get someone into the organization who's going to drive productivity, drive our revenue goals, be successful and a contributing member of our team, right? How do we do that in a differentiated way where we're not all fishing from the same pond and having to spend exorbitant amounts of money? Where can we get some either salary arbitrage or some diversity or whatever it might be that cultivates a really strong sales team? On the enablement side, we want to be able to overlay frameworks. We want to be able to do metrics-based evaluation. We talked about the importance of sales enablement as being the internal consultant that evaluates metrics and data and kicks that stuff around the organization and moves the things that are most important, the lowest hanging opportunities with the highest value impact. Customer success, same as sales leader, right? I know that's not the space we're talking in right now, but if we're talking revenue, you can't leave out customer success. There's a point at which they're going to end up owning 80% of the revenue with respect to renewals, upsells, and cross-sells. Same thing as we look at identifying talent pools there. And then finally, we've got this concept of sales operations. What's important there? Got to be able to benchmark, got to be able to look at analytics and understand and be able to identify where we're going to have success with new hires and how we actually drive that growth. So if you know Hilmon, you're getting to know me, right? You know I've never met an appropriate acronym that I haven't enjoyed. Today is like every other day in that respect. So we wrote this book that I'll be talking about at the end, Corey and I. It's called Hiring, Onboarding, and Ramping Salespeople. Inside of it is the team framework. What does the team framework espouse? We talk about talent. That's identifying, interviewing, and hiring talent. Going to dig into that a little bit. Engaging those folks, getting them into the organization and engaged in doing the work that they're hired to do. accelerating that engagement. So not just getting them in there and in the muck and doing the stuff, but actually doing it well and moving towards continuous improvement. And then getting to that point of mastery where they're able to move in role progression onto the next thing. So let's dig in. Starting first with talent. What's key and what's important? What we've observed in organizations that we've worked with that have had significant success in being able to have repeatable success in bringing people into the organization and getting them to perform at a level of expectation, a repeated level of consistent expectation, is having a talent roadmap. And when I say roadmap, I know that sounds obvious. It sounds like, okay, hey, it's Q4 for a lot of us. If you've got a fiscal year end at December 31, it's Q4 and we're thinking, what are we budgeting for 2023? That's great. That's not what I'm talking about. When I say a talent roadmap, I'm looking at this almost in the same way that people build software. We build software to a total addressable market, right? We then segment that market and understand who it is that we're going to go after to sell that thing to. And then we go and we address that market with our product. With a talent roadmap, we're doing much of the same. We're saying, where is it that we need to go as an organization? What types of talent do we need? And not just SDRs, AEs, and strategic account executives, and then enterprise folks, not just that as labels. We talked about this before when we mentioned some of these issues around hunting and hiring, how we sometimes just go to Indeed, go steal, or go to your job posting site of choice, go steal a job description from somebody else, search and replace the name where it goes from Angelica Corp to Hilmon Corp, and then suddenly we're sending that back out there. Not what I mean. What we're talking about here is how you really clearly identify what your talent needs are for your organization based upon your maturity, meaning your ability to grow people inside of the organization, your ability to attract those people. Sometimes what we need and what we can attract aren't exactly the same. So how are we internally building the lattice underneath that individual, whether that's external courses, whether that's external mentorship, or internal systems that allow that person to succeed. So building out a really clear talent map helps us understand where are the folks who we're trying to target, how do we target them, how do we develop interest, bring them into the organization, and here's a really key point, how do we find them at the right time? Right time meaning we can spin up a lot of cycles in a hiring process, having conversations with people who are not ready to leave their existing organization or not ready to come to ours. So how do we get that timing just right to ensure that they're coming into our org? That's one piece that's critical for you to discuss as a sales org to identify what it is that you might need. From a talent competency model perspective, we talked about this a little bit as it relates to our 4S system of strategy, systems, staff, and skills. On the skill set side, the competency model is us looking around the organization and saying, here are the things that a person coming to our company needs to be able to have already acquired, right? These are acquired skills that someone has developed either through school, either through other jobs, either through work life experience, or through some extracurriculars on their own that are going to be incredibly impactful for the position. Then there are the competencies that are developing. Those developing competencies are the things that are competitive advantage for us because we know we can imbue you with subject matter expertise. We can help you understand the market. We can help you understand how to have C-level, mid-level, SMB, whatever it might be, type conversations. We can help you understand how to position us competitively. So we don't need you to come into the organization with all of that experience already. Here's the difference. This is acquired. This is what we can develop. That part that we can develop is really key to our competitive differentiation. And then finally, at the risk of nesting an acronym inside of an acronym, is the hire framework. The hire framework over here on the right, you see toolkit. That toolkit is how we go about hunting. This is what is your strategy for talent procurement. If you're using an external organization, they probably have one. If you're using an internal one, then you've got to be working with marketing in order to be able to present yourself in a way that your company is a place where people want to work, and not just the company. But don't forget, you hear this all the time, that folks go to work for, and they also leave managers, right? So what are we doing in brand development for the manager? I'm not saying go crazy on LinkedIn and start developing all your managers into their own brand, but what are we doing to help really talk about what impact a manager can have on an individual's success, profession, and their personal life and career? That's going to draw people to the organization. In the interview process, there are three key elements of the interview. Obviously, we've probably got that chronological interview down pat, where it's like, what did you do here? What did they hire you to do? What did you perform? And how did it work out? Who can I talk to there, right? We've all got that. There are two other pieces that are really critical here. One is the skill interview, right? How are you uncovering skills? And it's not just sell me this pen. I hope none of us are using that right now. But how do we go about uncovering the types of skills that are necessary that we've identified in our competency model. This skill could be a skill of persuasion. The skill could be research. A lot of people don't realize that a lot of sales is research, right? I know we don't want to spend hours researching. We can debate that till the cows come home, but there is an element that is important to be able to research and ascertain and pattern match where we have opportunities to sell. No one ever really says that in a sales interview. It's all about what are your persuasion skills? What methodology have you espoused? What have you closed before? What have your numbers been? But there are other pieces that are really critical for us to understand. And then this final piece that I think is really critical in the interview process of this hire rubric, hire methodology template, is that we've got to be able to have an experiential interview with people. So if you're hiring salespeople are probably some of the best interviewers on the planet because we're doing it all day long. That's what a cold conversation is. That's what a discovery conversation is. It's an interview process, right? Typically, we're asking the questions, not answering them, but we still understand how that goes. And I'll tell you this, the people who are probably great interviews have probably had way too much experience at it, which means that they may not last long in your organization. That's a footnote. Hopefully you read that meta there, right? So the idea here with respect to the interview process and an experience, I'll give you an example. There's an organization that I was working with that was in really tight quarters. They had a culture that was just really collaborative. A lot of like jamming back and forth and talking, a high velocity sale, very transactional. They're all on the same sales floor. This was a couple of years back. And they wanted to ensure that they could bring somebody into the organization who would have success in that environment. And other people that they had talked to where they said, can you multitask effectively? Can you focus? Can you hit deadlines? People say, of course I can, of course I can, of course I can, right? And they get into the org and maybe they can't. So what we've developed, and this is not like rocket science, all we did was they had a glass conference room and we had somebody come in, this is like their second interview, and we gave them an assignment, which was to take the market segmentation and identify some folks that they would contact and how they would go about matching the pains that we solved for to what they could glean of the company online. We gave them 45 minutes to go do this exercise and come back and reflect to us what their plan of attack would be to do some kind of account-based sales to these organizations. And we put them in the conference room. In the time that they were in there, we sent lots of little satellites after them. We sent one person in to just interrupt and go, oh, hey, Jacob, so you're here for the interview. I've heard great things about you. I really enjoy working here. I'd love to chat with you. Where were you working before? Just to interrupt the flow. We sent another person in who just kind of put a finger up and was on the phone having a conversation while they're overdoing their thing, just as a distraction. I'm not saying to do this as some ruse. I'm not saying have fun and torture your interviewer, but creating the context where somebody has the experience of going through what it's going to be like to work at this organization, then you can see whether or not they're able to do what they said they would do, which is to complete that task on time, gives you a much clearer indication as to whether or not that person is going to perform. And there are lots of ways you can create an experiential interview where you can get an experience of what that candidate can do. It's great for them because if they are a good match, then it will show up. And if they're not, you'll both know, and you've saved yourselves some time. The rubric piece is once you've got this talent competency model down pat, you should assign some values to those competencies. How important is curiosity? On a scale of 1 to 5, is that a 5? Great. How important is the ability to influence decisions? How important is how important is it for you to be able to have linear thought and communication? If someone's doing demos, linear thought is really key. This is one that I'm always looking for later stage enterprise type salespeople is, can they convey something in a linear way? Again, give them the best chance to succeed though. I'll tell you, there was a person in my own organization who I interviewed. Some of you might know him, won't say his name, but he loves to surf. And when we were talking about our process, I said, give me an example of how you'd explain to someone who is completely new to surfing, how they could get involved in it and get to the point where they could actually be competently riding decent sized waves. Right? This is something he knows inside and out. He gave me a great linear explanation from the size of the board to buy, to the beaches you should start with, to the things that the equipment you would have to the mindset that's most important, et cetera, et cetera. He got the job because that was a really clear indication that he knows how to explain something competently in a way that someone with very little experience would be able to understand. And then finally, you got to be able to evaluate. The evaluation rubric is often folks coming in going, yeah, I thought Angelica was pretty good. Yeah, I liked her. Oh, I love the glasses. Oh, I didn't like the long hair. Whatever it might be, right? That doesn't matter. None of this matters to the process. Create an evaluation. Love the long hair, Angelica. The evaluation process should be based upon this rubric, right? We're talking about how we go about identifying numbers so that we eliminate bias. And I'm not necessarily just talking about the same social bias that is very, very important right now, but I'm talking about just personal bias of like, I'm done with interviewing. I think this person was good. You know, what is it they say that judges before lunch, like just before lunch, to have
Yeah.
far more negative opinions than they do right after or first thing in the morning, right? Same thing. We're all human. Like, let's account for it. So that's the talent piece. How do we go about ensuring that we've got a roadmap, a competency model? We're using this framework internally. Everybody who is part of the interview process understands really critically where they fit in. We go to work and we get the best talent we can get. And then what do we do once we've got them? Any questions so far, Angelica?
No questions.
Okay, cool. Let's keep it moving. Engaging. So I'm a fan of talking about engaging versus talking about onboarding. The reason is it's really simple, and it is parsing language, but I think language is really important. When you talk about onboarding, it's kind of like you're reaching over, you're getting somebody in and it's there. Like you've hit that thing where there they are, they're in, they're on board, and we're done. And we're going to move to the next cohort and get them on board too. I think of it more as like, how do you get a person engaged? Because engaged means they are enmeshed in the culture. Engaged means they are talking to prospects, if that's their job, right? Engaged means they're collaborating across the organization. Engaged means that they're working with their counterparts. Engaged means that they're participating in coaching and training. So I look at this more along the lines of, instead of like, let's get them started and then get them to the point where they're past started and then move on, to how do we get the cogs to like line up, if that's the right term, to start meshing with the machine. So a couple things that are important with respect to that. Collaboration models. A collaboration model basically just means, how do you look at communication around the organization? How do you look at internal rapport? Most sales methodologies talk about rapport as being critical for prospecting, critical for working with existing customers, et cetera. It's just about working with human beings. As critical to engage people from a standpoint of rapport inside of your organization. We talk about the scale model. Scale stands for status, certainty, autonomy, likeness, and equity. Status is their perception of themselves relative to their peers. Certainty is the understanding around their role and what they're supposed to be accountable to. Autonomy is obviously the freedom to be able to do it. Likeness is them understanding how this is relevant to them, likeness and relevance, right? And then equity is just basically, are they in a fair environment where they're judged fairly and given ample opportunity, right? That's one model to look at with respect to collaboration as you're bringing people into the organization. Activity-based goal setting, that ties directly to this concept of JIT training. That JIT just means just-in-time training. When we talk about just-in-time training, this is basically saying, you've heard me say this throughout all of these sessions, the concept of having someone get on board and drink from a fire hose is a waste of water. Right? It's a waste of everybody's effort. It's going to exhaust the person who's trying to digest it, and it's going to just be a futile effort for everybody involved in it. Instead, train the things that are going to be part of the activity of the individual at that point. So if it's week 2 and that individual is just going to be sourcing and making calls and sending emails, train on those things and train on all the context around that so that they get the repeatability of having done it relevant to the job function, rather than piling on, Hilmon Corp 101 to 601 and then sending you off to do the job when only one portion of that is relevant, and yet you've been stuck in classes or in front of an LMS trying to learn it all. So set your activity-based goal setting, meaning here's the activity that someone's going to be doing. We're staging it based upon when they get into the organization and when we expect them to have developed some competence around those things. And we're going to set goals relative to that competence, right? And then from the standpoint of learning path management, I'm moving back and forth between toolkit and these boxes on the left side. So with respect to learning path management, the toolkit here is get high repetitions. Everyone knows that if you can't train something that someone is going to go apply regularly, and if those repetitions have to come from role play, that's fine. I get it that some of us are in orgs that have a longer sales cycle, and maybe you do 1 demo a month, maybe 2 a week, who knows what it is. It may not be the same velocity. Well, get the repetitions somehow and understand that it's not going to be retained unless you do. And then be able to benchmark where and when someone should have learned those things successfully. And then you can get to some of these other things we'll talk about in just a second. One piece I want to point out here with respect to that is clearly understanding that spaced repetition is critical to ongoing learning for adults. And that's anybody over 18 years old, anybody who has left high school. It is critical that whatever we are teaching them, they have an opportunity to have repeated access to, and that they have an opportunity to use in practice. We'll talk about that a little bit when we get to this piece called Accelerate. The last piece here, again, benchmarking these things. If you don't have a benchmark out of the gate, track what the progression is for someone who you just brought into your organization, call that the benchmark, and then evaluate against it as you bring new people in. Put forth a hypothesis based upon this person's experience, based upon the things that they have acquired as skills coming into the org, and based upon what we are going to develop, we know they should be here. Why is this important? Because you've got to know the point at which you've reached engagement. You got to know the point at which somebody has kind of locked in, and you can move them toward the next path, which is this concept of accelerating their growth. The reason acceleration, I think, is key is because what we have to be looking at here, and this isn't hustle culture necessarily. This is just what I would call best practices around developing. Maybe this should be called developing top salespeople, hiring, onboarding, and ramping top salespeople. I know not everyone wants to be at the top. I get that. I understand the reality of that. But if you are looking at driving success, and by driving, I mean cultivating a space in which you can nurture this to be successful, not necessarily carrot and sticking somebody to death, right? One thing that's critical here is outcomes versus time. So you just heard me say benchmarking is key. Benchmarking the activity against the competence level is key. We're going to dig into these rubrics in just a second, but look at them instead of time, saying we've got a 90-day ramp. Instead, let's say, here are the outcomes that we're expecting. We expect somebody to be able to competently make their first discovery call at this juncture. We expect someone to competently be able to convert a deal from discovery to demo at this juncture. We expect somebody to competently write an email on their own, given the tools that we provided them, within the first 48 hours of their job, whatever it might be. But tying those outcomes instead of just an arbitrary time on the calendar this is the ramp period is going to be critical to monitoring success. It's how you benchmark where you are along that path, where you've got trouble ahead, leading indicators of, wow, this is not working out really well. Either we're not delivering the material in the right way, or the candidate is the hire is not doing their part, or there's something else that we've missed here that we should be attacking. That's going to give you that really clear directional indication around how you're accelerating someone through your organization. Couple things to benchmark here that are really critical. First activity to first deal. Sometimes that's a short amount of time. It also depends upon what you're selling. It depends upon the person's level of experience. It depends upon your organization, lots of variables, right? But the first activity, whatever that activity might be for that individual, if that's a cold call, if that's a cold email, if that's attending a trade show, if that's picking up something that's come inbound, whatever it might be, to first deal, being able to take that amount of activity and effort and figuring out what are the things that someone needs to know in that process to get there quickly is going to create your opportunity to ensure not just that you're hitting your metrics and that you're hitting your revenue targets, but also that you're able to really concisely articulate to an individual and provide an individual with all the support that they need to be able to do that thing, which is a critical function in your organization. This is really key to success. These arbitrary numbers of we'll do a 45-day ramp, or we'll do a ramp to 90 days, and then it's just to a certain target number is not often something a salesperson can control. When instead you're targeting activity and learning, and you have an understanding based upon your experience in the organization as to what that activity and learning will correlate to from the standpoint of success, or what the expectations are, which we'll dig into a second here. That's what's going to help you to help your organization and to help the individual to be successful. And then obviously there's this Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. Let's just hop into that really quickly. The forgetting curve, if you haven't seen this before, you can Google it. Maybe you'll find a better image than I was able to. But the idea is, if you're looking at the top left over there, that's the first day of a training, right? So first day of a training, everybody's got immediate recall. And then as you move to the right by day 2, day 3, day 4, by the time you get to 30 days, you're really down at that maroon line where there is limited to no recall of what's been trained. So this is why Firehose doesn't work. If you're looking at the yellow line and the green line, that's what happens as you provide spaced repetition. So second time of study would be the second repetition. Third time of study would be the third repetition. You can figure out for yourself what happens to that as you continue to pace this. So imagine if you take an organization, you're doing just-in-time training and providing just-in-time content to someone who is having relevant experiences all day long, every day, and high levels of repetition. This means they're going to remember it. And then you stack on the next piece of the process for them. Let's look at this concept from the standpoint of a competency rubric. Competency rubrics, this is not super complex. I like things that are simple, right? I'm lazy. I like things that are simple, but they work really well. So here's the deal. Understand the competency. Let's say for an account executive, the competency is asking pain questions. That's all I want you to do. I want to make sure that when you get on a discovery conversation, you're asking pain questions. I don't want you to feature benefit someone to death. I don't want you to talk about how we're swifter, we're faster, we're stronger, we're lighter, we're better than the competition. Just ask good pain questions, because I know if you do that, you're going to have success, right? An unsatisfactory example of asking pain questions would be if they don't fall into our winning zone. If you're just tuning into these sessions for the first time, winning zone is that place where you are uniquely qualified to outpace the competition. You do something better and more impactfully for solving a problem than your competition does. It's not good enough to just ask generic pain questions. That's just not going to cut it for somebody in my organization. You can start there, but that is not a satisfactory demonstration of the competency to me. What's satisfactory is if you happen to ask those pain questions inside of the winning zone. So at least you've gotten that information from our training. You deeply understand, here are the places that we should be talking about our product. We shouldn't be talking over here in the battlefield, because that's just a race to price challenges. And we shouldn't be talking about, we shouldn't just be asking generic questions. If it's excellent from a competency perspective, excellent means that it's in the winning zone and it's persona relevant. So not only did I ask Angelica questions that are relative to her pain, but relative to the pain that she's experiencing based upon the job she has to do in her role as an XYZ person inside of an organization, right? That's all a competency rubric looks like. So you list out these competencies based upon these stages of activity that you have as expectations as you're accelerating someone along their path to success. Angelica? Angelica?
My internet cut down. I'm back.
Okay, I'm frozen, so I'm hoping you can hear me. You can hear me?
I can hear you. So maybe
Okay.
it is gold.
I think it might be. That's all right. As long as you can hear me, we're going to keep moving.
Okay.
All right. So the I don't want to hit any of my buttons because that might kick me out, and then that's just going to annoy everybody. So I won't do that. So anyway, so here we are. This is the competency model. So all you do here is you build out your competencies based upon the just-in-time learnings that you feel are really critical for an individual who's come into your organization as they move along this path toward mastery, right? Second piece here is this concept of certification. Certification can be done by depth. So let's just say pain-based discovery is critical certification, meaning I want to make sure that we check this box for Silas. This is the individual that we're looking at here, who we just hired, who we're bringing on as an account executive. So what's important here? First off, he has to be doing this piece of having persona-related winning zone pain questions in every conversation. Once we get there, we're going to certify that, looking here at the first row by saying, in pain-based discovery, he does it, I'm sorry, there shouldn't be two checks here. He does it under pressure. Let's pretend that that's the only check on this chart, right? Which means when he's either in a role play with someone who's being a little antagonistic or a little difficult, or maybe that person is not sharing information as openly as someone might typically, then he still is able to navigate this conversation through pain-based discovery and asking questions, right? Running a disco entirely by our playbook, right? He's doing that well. And you see there's only 4 criteria here. When we look at certification depth, we're looking at, does the person know it? Does the person do it? Because we talked about this before, this concept of the knowing and doing gap. And there's a place where a lot of salespeople know a lot of stuff, and then you go listen to their call recordings and they're not doing it, right? So know it. Do they do it? Do they do it well? Do they do it under pressure, right? Sure, there's some subjectivity there, but this is enough to give you an idea as to whether or not you've accelerated this person's path to growth. I'm gonna pause there for just a second. Angelica, questions?
No questions, but question for you. These types of templates, do you provide them, or is there like a PDF that people can download and kind of use this for reference?
Absolutely. They should ping me, and because this is just developed for a slideshow, we've got, this is all inside of a spreadsheet, a workbook, sorry, that has multiple spreadsheets that help kind of chart this stuff out. I can either make it available and you can put it on my Modern Sales Pros page, or people can ping me directly and you'll share my contact information in the chat.
Yep, I dropped Hilmon's LinkedIn, so feel free to reach out to him. He also has a great Twitter, so also reach out to him and tweet him.
Great. Okay. Last piece here is the concept of mastery, right? We've done TEAM. So mastery. Mastery is how we get people, again, you've got engagement that gets them going. You've got acceleration that's moving people along the path towards how they develop complete competency in their role based upon the things that we've identified are important for that role to be optimal. And then we get to a point of mastery, right? Mastery is a really key thing to understand, because once somebody's developed mastery, first off, we want to be able to come back to them and congratulate that motion. I know there's a lot of congratulations that happens in sales with respect to compensation and bonuses and things like that. I get that. But it's also great from the standpoint of professional development to come back to somebody and say, here's what we laid out for this role. Here's what you've done to get there. Great job. Here's the coaching you've responded to. Here's the training that you've done. Here's how you've certified in conversations that I've listened to and in things that I've observed in your work as a salesperson. And here's how you are getting ready for the next role. That doesn't necessarily mean that the next role has to be there. I understand that we've got lots of constraints in organizations these days, and we may not be able to promote somebody into that next role just yet, but it's still important to develop readiness. And that readiness will be relevant to the role that they're in today, regardless of whether or not you have that next space available. And you should be able to articulate when and what that space would be. And that's a mutual conversation. Some people move into a deeper, an IC role with deeper levels of responsibility. And then, there are obviously those folks who move into management and other tracks as well. So providing that is going to be critical. So mastery from a salesperson's perspective, there are a couple things that we look at. Full pipeline coverage is the first place to go, right? Has someone demonstrated that they have full pipeline coverage that's real? Here's where it's challenging. So there's fractional attainment, right? When someone gets to about 25% of goal, 25% of attainment, things that we want to look at in pipeline management are if the opportunities are all in our target market, if they have exit criteria attached to them, if we've got pipeline hygiene around next steps and projected deal cycles. Are the dates based upon a prospect's timeline, or did we just tick the box that says the end of the month and everything ends on the 30th or the 31st, right? That's the easiest way in your CRM to tell whether or not somebody has developed mastery. If every deal ends on the 30th or 31st, that did not come from the prospect. I don't know any prospects who said, yes, I think we will have a deal by the 31st of December. It just doesn't happen that way. And then all lost deals have real clarity around the reason why those deals were lost, right? That's at 25%, right? That's around fractional attainment. When you get to 50%, we want to make sure that coaching has been applied. If someone's at 50% of their target, are they applying the coaching? Are they approaching sales cycle lengths that are reasonable? This is net add onto the things that we've already talked about with respect to the 25% attainment. At 80%, we want to add rates, right? We should be at a point where, based upon the amount of activity that we've got, based upon the amount of opportunities that we have in pipeline, the win rates are tracking the way someone else in our organization who has more experience and has developed a deeper level of expertise is trending. We want to make sure that they're in line with our expectations and historical precedent, and that there's a clear focus on selling to our winning zone. And then finally, once you get to 100% period attainment, whatever that might be, if it's month over month, quarter over quarter, if you're doing this in some other more creative way, then this is the place where we begin to start having conversations around back-to-back attainment and whether or not we can set clearer milestones around full quota coverage, pipeline coverage, et cetera, going forward. And that's when you're looking at, are we expanding territory? Are we expanding the number of opportunities that this individual is getting? And what types of conversations are we having with respect to this last bullet here, which is their readiness for the next role and how we go about engaging people. Again, engage meaning going back to the E in team, and that engagement is in the next role that we've got for the specific individual. So these are the pieces, just to reprise what we're looking at again. You start off with talent because it's all about the raw clay. If you're on the front end and you're not bringing in the best talent you can possibly identify, afford, and attract to your organization, then you're already at a competitive disadvantage, right? Once you've got them, how are you engaging them in the organization? Everywhere from the standpoint of how we're bringing folks in to interconnect with the team and to collaborate, get moving into a coaching motion, get integrated into their workflow and understanding what their responsibilities are and providing them with the training and content that's going to make that impactful. Acceleration, how you move them along that path at a way that is an ongoing, continuous improvement, where they understand, benchmarked against previous experience, where they're going to be successful and how to get them there. And then finally, towards this concept of mastery, which, we're in sales. So above all, it's around pipeline and quota. But even beyond that, there are these pieces around attainment of skill set and attainment of impact that are going to be critically important for this person in the organization. Any questions there?
Hilmon, Amy has the question on, do you have any vendor recommendations for just-in-time learning that you use?
Vendor recommendations for just-in-time learning. That's a big question. I try to stay away from vendor recommendations, first of all, in large public forums. I'm happy to have a conversation with this individual and learn. I'm such a salesperson, right? It's like, let me learn more about what it is that you're trying to solve, and then I can make a recommendation. I realize this too, that I always ask a question once someone has posed something to me, because I like to clarify where I'm going. So not to be evasive, but let me be a little more clear about what I mean when I say, let me get back to that slide for just a second here. When I say just-in-time training. So just-in-time training content is more about the training being relevant to the activity of the salesperson at that moment. So if the salesperson is being tasked, let's make it really easy. Let's say you've got an SDR, and the SDR's role is to hop on LinkedIn Navigator, find these people who are in your target market based upon segmentation that's provided by marketing, and to send emails, right? They can get creative with subject lines. They can get creative with the types of email templates that they use, but this is their job, and this is what they have to do. And they've got to develop sequences there too. So in that concept, in that construct, what a lot of organizations do is they go deep on product training. And they'll spend a week and a half so that you learn the ins and outs of the product. And then they'll go deep on some other pieces with respect to the close, and deep on segment. Instead, give training relative to writing good emails and writing good copy and what subject line looks like, and give them just enough of the product piece to be able to understand, relative to the persona that you're targeting, what are the pains that you solve for, right? That's what I mean by just-in-time training content. If this individual is asking more about like online ad hoc training, there's lots of that out there, and I'm happy to have a conversation relative to what some of that stuff could be externally.
Yeah, Amy said that she'll connect with you on LinkedIn, so be on the lookout for Amy in your direct messages.
Thanks, shall Amy. Do. What else have we got?
That is all. Does anyone have any questions for Hilmon?
I'm at the end of my slides, so whatever you've got relative to this or anything else, if someone has attended, if this is your fourth session with me, thanks for coming. If you want to ask anything about any previous sessions, I'm happy with that too. Anything that's just off topic, but might fall into my area of sales management and sales enablement expertise, happy to take that on too. Whatever you got.
And I'll also drop the link to get Hilmon's book, Hiring, Onboarding, and Ramping Sales People. I'm going to drop the link to the Closed Loop bookstore.
Awesome. Yeah, the book goes deeply into these concepts and is more highly tactical and practical. There are a lot of tables in here that you can build into spreadsheets. Again, also, I think there's a link in the book that kicks out to the worksheet that I talked about that has everything from hiring rubrics to interview rubrics to interview questions to how you go about establishing an experiential interview to how you go about evaluating internally, and even how you do reference checks that aren't just, tell me a little bit about Angelica, but reference checks that actually give you some indication around where you can have some opportunities with respect to coaching to help somebody to be more successful, and how you can clarify whether or not they'd be a good fit inside of your organization. So it's a nice workbook that has some really great resources. The upshot of that also is, a lot of times from a hiring perspective, what happens is, you look at your calendar, it's like, oh, I've got an interview at 1:00 with, Jane. And you get prepared for the interview about 15 minutes before. You grab 2 or 3 people who happen to be like standing around the lunchroom. You drag them into the thing, and both you and Jane have a poor experience, right? Because it's not a well choreographed interview. You're not getting the information that you need to get. You're kind of all asking the same questions, and Jane isn't able to shine to her brightest light, etc. So how you go about in a frictionless way, and in a very light touch way, involving people in the interview process, helping understand who's the coach in the interview, who's the person who's gleaning chronological information, who's the person who's identifying skill set information if you're doing it this way. And this could be an interview as a panel, or this could be a separate interview as stages. I had someone ask me once what I meant by a coach in an interview. I'll give you a clear example of that. And this is a clear example also of an experiential interview. I've said to candidates before, hey, when you go talk to the CRO, I want you to know that Pete is actually a very numbers and analytically driven person. So where you've given me really clear narrative on what you did to be successful, when you meet with Pete, take a little time beforehand and distill that narrative into the numbers. Like, what were you doing? How much activity correlated to what results? What were your conversion metrics? How did you move the needle on those things? What was your ACV? How did that play out in the sales conversation? Talk to the numbers, and that's going to really impact Pete's impression of you for this role. And you'd be surprised how many people do not capitalize on that coaching and stick to exactly what they were going to do, come hell or high water. And that gives you an indication of someone's level of coachability, right? If they're not going to do it for the biggest sale of all, which is them, being able to pay their bills on time, then they may be less inclined to do so for your product as well. So just little things like that you fold into the process that give you a lot of clarity, rather than just having to wing it. This is how you create a competitive advantage in hiring.
Yeah, the experiential interview is really interesting. I'm now thinking in the past, when I've gone to the office and sit in a little room and people coming in and out, how that was intentional maybe, and how that's just, it all kind of feeds into whether or not that person is the right fit. And it's also really good to see more of a culture fit as well, whether how they respond, if they're visibly annoyed that people come in and out and kind of throw them off track. So that's a really interesting method that I hadn't even thought of, that people do. So thank you for sharing
It
that.
is. And it's, and I want to be respectful here from the standpoint of folks, and I'm sure everybody gets this. I just want to say it out loud. The idea here is not to create a ruse, right? It's not to just let's just play with these candidates and see what we can. The idea is that there are things that are critical in your organization that if someone is not aligned with, they're not going to be successful, which means they're going to be miserable and you're going to be looking for a new hire in the next 90 days. So in the spirit of giving everybody full transparency about what to expect, you create these experiences. I'll tell you another one. There is a founder who I said, look, you all are so early in your company and you pivot on a dime with respect to messaging. You pivot all the time with respect to segmentation. Everyone is not cut out for that. A lot of people like to come into an organization and have, a clear-cut path for what they've got to do every day and sit down and execute. And they're not able to just adjust consistently. I said, you've got to create an experience in your interview where you just turn things upside down and see how a person goes with it. And they did. They had someone they set it up where an individual is going to present their existing company. Also do that. Don't have people come present your company. That doesn't make any sense. Have people present the place where they've been selling for the last X number of years, where they have, again, the greatest opportunity to demonstrate their best foot forward without having to try to learn what your company does in, overnight. At any rate, they had the person come in, present their company was the idea. And then as the person came in, they said, quick pivot here. Instead of 20 minutes to do this, we're going to dial it down to 5, because that's never happened to a salesperson before, right? We're going to dial this down to 5. And actually, instead of a VP of Eng being in the room, you're actually talking to a CIO, right? How does a person respond to that? 2 people didn't do so well, right? 2 people got really flustered. And one person was like, okay, well, can I just whiteboard instead of using this deck? And they said, sure. And that's what that person did. So these things are just things that one should do to ensure that you're bringing in the best talent, best fit for your organization, that you're best equipped to support and be successful.
That's a really smart way of doing that. And you can see how creative they are and they can think on the fly. And as we all know, sales, you don't really know what prospect you're going to get on the other side of the phone. And you can have this elevator pitch down and you never know what their attitude is going to be like. So just being able to think on your feet is so cool. So that's such a great way of, interviewing them. Brent in the comments had said, love the example of how some candidates thrive versus not in a high change environment. And that's so true. It's a really great way to, weed them out.
And it's not better or worse, right? That's the key there, is it's not that one is better than another. It's just one is a better fit for your org than for the other, right? Yeah.
Any other questions in the audience? We have about 5 minutes with Hilmon. And it's our last one, so be sure to ask your questions now. If not, connect with Hilmon on LinkedIn. Yeah, we also dropped his Twitter if you are on Twitter, and get the copy of the book. Just a reminder, this event is recorded, and the presentation, along with the templates that Hilmon had mentioned throughout the call, will be made available on the MSP website. Oh, I see a little red notification in the Q&A. Oh. We have a video Q&A. Michelle, I don't know if that is a mistake. when I approve you, you might go on stage with us, but I know we had done this before, and we were very open to having someone on stage. So I'm going to approve you, but if it's a mistake, feel free to not join.
Don't put my video on.
You can turn it. We're not seeing you. We're seeing
yeah,
your
the platform allows video. I don't know how to turn it off, but
Okay.
we don't see you. Don't worry, but we can hear you.
Okay. So here's
There
my
you go.
question.
Hey,
As you, hey, thank you so much for taking a moment to answer my question. So as you think about the ramp process for salespeople, can you talk at all to your perspective or thought process on microlearning and any good platforms to use for microlearning?
Microlearning, do we mean like a learning management system?
Well, yes, but specifically, I'm very interested in making sure that we don't overwhelm people when they walk in the door,
Yeah.
and that they can take in micro learnings, 2-minute, 3-minute micro learnings to get them up to speed in their patch and getting towards their revenue as quickly as possible.
So I love this question. This is all we build. We work with orgs to build out their LMS, and all we do is build micro learning, as opposed to, and I know the antithesis of this is the 45-minute long, subject matter expert going through slides that are antiquated, that have 700 words on them, and going into depth on all these things that really don't matter. The challenge with micro learning is that you have to be able to sit down to build out the curriculum in advance. And this is the challenge and the opportunity, right? So what we often suggest, and you should ping me on LinkedIn as well, because we've got a nice little spreadsheet that lays these things out as well, that was created by Jared, who's our learning and development specialist internally. This is how you go about identifying, okay, along someone's path towards acceleration, right? To use the terms that we just used in this session.
Yes.
What are the things, the activities that they need to do? And then to do those activities at the level of expertise that we would like to see them do, or at an optimal level, what are the competencies that they need to have developed? For each of those competencies, how do we break them down into less than 5-minute elements of micro learning? And when I say elements, an element could be a video, an element could be audio, an element could be a quick quiz, an element could be an infographic, it could be all sorts of things. And luckily, most learning management systems, and I'm not saying learning management system meaning that you've got to boil the ocean and do something that's like super robust, but whatever you're using could probably accommodate all of that media. And you ascertain what media will best deliver this in the most finite amount of time possible. And then you get it out there and test it. And so I can't recommend a platform per se, but I can certainly recommend the process. And I love the question, because this is truly the best way that salespeople learn. And also being able to have that discoverable. In other words, if I'm about to get on a call with a XYZ persona in this specific marketplace, in this segment for this product, and I don't know how best to demo this thing that we do, right? If I can go somewhere and in 3 minutes get highlights on what that looks like, on what the language tracking and messaging is for that, and the typical things that this person and this persona is experiencing, and I've already had the competency of how to ask pain questions and do good discovery, that's where the magic happens. And that's where, Michelle, are you in enablement, or are you in sales management? Okay, I don't know if she's still there. Whatever role you're in.
Michelle's good.
Okay, so whatever role you might be in, if it's enablement, this allows you to have a one-to-many way to truly be impactful across the organization in micro-learning opportunities. And if you are in sales management or leadership, you can point back to these things and go, look, you don't have to boil the ocean. This isn't a 3-hour thing. Go look at these 2 modules inside of our XYZ tool, and you'll be able to prepare yourself for that conversation. Then come back to me, we'll coach on it. And that's where you really get an organization of continuous improvement that is a learning organization.
Right. I'm in sales operations. So
you are. Okay.
Yeah.
It's an astute question. And that is the trend. Much more in that direction versus let's just take the town hall that we did a year and a half ago and drop that into a learning management system and hope somebody watches it, which is unfortunately what a lot of people do.
and I think that, I think that if we can do more life hacks and not have to be so formal all the time, that is also something that becomes valuable over time to the sales team.
I agree completely.
I'd rather make a 30-second video and say, hey, you guys, I'm not really worried what I look like on stage. So if it helps them
Let me tell you this too. It is never a bad thing for a salesperson to say, I wish we had more content like that. most sales teams are not, most salespeople in their organizations are not saying that about the the onboarding that they receive or the ongoing that they receive. Thanks for the question.
Thanks, Michelle, and thank you everyone for attending. We are at time. Hilmon, it's been such a pleasure. I know this is our last one of the Sales School Performance Series, and I hope you're going to come back for another series next year for modern sales pros. For those of you who want to watch all of Hilmon's masterclass, I'm going to drop the link to the library of all the recording key takeaways and presentations. Yes, Michelle? Sorry?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm not.
Oh, no worries. And it will be, this episode, or the series, sorry, will be found on the MSP previous event page before the end of the day. So stay tuned for that. And have a great day, everyone. Thank you again. And we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.